All right, buckle up because this is one of those segments where you can feel a season taking shape before a single snap is played. Michigan fans, you've probably already stared at it, circled it, maybe even argued about it. The 2026 Michigan football schedule is out, and the more you sit with it, the more one thing becomes clear. This season is absolutely here for the taking. I got to tell you, this is a fascinating moment for Michigan football because we're talking about a program in transition, but not in retreat. You've got Kyle Whittingham's influence, a new regime feel around the building, and yet expectations haven't dipped at all. If anything, they've sharpened. This doesn't feel like a reset at all. Not in the least. It feels like a recalibration for Michigan football. And so when you scan the schedule, I think what jumps out immediately to me is opportunity. I'm not seeing easy, I'm not seeing guaranteed, but I am seeing a ton of opportunity. Because there are games that are going to define this team. Games that are going to tell us exactly how real this version of Michigan is. And when I look at it from start to finish, I keep landing in the same place with this. I see one loss. And I'm gonna get into it before everybody goes, oh, how? Or panic mode. I'm gonna tell you. I see one loss, and I see it coming at the hands of Oregon. From my view, it looks like Oregon is the most complete team Michigan is going to face. They've got speed. They've got a modern offense. They've got depth. Obviously, Dan Lanning always does a spectacular job every year. And I think they can stress teams in ways that most Big Ten teams can't. And so if Michigan drops one game in 2026, that's the one that makes the most sense to me. And here's the thing. Losing to Oregon or losing one game at all doesn't derail anything. Not the Big Ten race, not playoff positioning, not anything. Not national perception, not anything. One game is a survivable loss in today's college football. I think what matters more is how Michigan responds in the games that carry bigger weight earlier in the season, and that obviously starts with Oklahoma. That Oklahoma game is looming large for Michigan because Michigan fans haven't forgotten 2025. And honestly, that was a game that they could have won, in my opinion. Going back to that, Michigan did not play good during that game, and it was kind of close. I mean, going back to that game, you just didn't have Bryce Underwood clicking and passing. I think there was some offensive play calling questions. There was the big run from Justice Haynes that happened after the first half. But if things were a little bit different, Michigan could have won that game. And so I think that loss still sits there unresolved. And this is where the Whittingham regime is going to set the tone. I think this staff understands what it means to knock them out early. And getting a win against Oklahoma in 2026 isn't about revenge sound bites. It's not that kind of situation. But it's about showing some growth. It's going to be about proving Michigan can win the big non-conference games consistently, not just occasionally. And so I really like Michigan in that game. I think they're more physical, more disciplined, and frankly more prepared this time around. And then obviously there's Ohio State in Columbus. And I'm sure some people that listen to the start of this are thinking, what do you mean? So one game, Oregon, not Ohio State? And I'm going to tell you something. Let's be very clear about this. It's a statement. It's about believing in the trajectory of the program, where they are, how Whittingham went in and stabilized the roster. And this rivalry still defines seasons, legacies. And I'm going to tell you something. Ohio State fans got all razzle-dazzled last year. They finally beat Michigan. And I got bad news for them because Michigan's going to beat Ohio State this year in Columbus again. And a win like that is going to balance the power of conversation again for Michigan. I think Michigan is better built for that environment. I think the physicality, the maturity of the quarterback development all matter in that setting. And I think this staff understands that you don't tiptoe in that game, you lean into it. And that brings me to Bryce Underwood. This is the year where Bryce Underwood stops being the future and starts becoming the present. Now, nobody's saying he's got to be perfect. No one's asking him to carry the entire program at large. But development matters, and everything around him is set up to finally succeed. The offensive structure, the portal additions, the returning leadership, it's all aligned to let him grow without forcing him to be Superman. And I got to tell you, Michigan quietly did really solid work in the portal. Not flashy, not desperate, but targeted. I mean, players who filled gaps, players who raised the floor, players who understand their role. That's who they got. You combine that with key returners like Rod Moore, whose presence on defense is enormous, both on the field and in the locker room. And you've got a roster that doesn't feel fragile at all. It feels stable. I mean, Kyle Whittingham has done a fantastic job. And I talked about this in one of my other segments. And so we got to talk about something that feels a little bit small, but absolutely isn't, because the Michigan versus Michigan State game has been moved to November. And I got to tell you, that surprised me a little bit, because this is a game that almost always lives in October, right around Halloween. It's been part of a rhythm of both programs. And I think moving it to November kind of changes the vibe a little bit. For me, at least. I mean, it's colder, it's heavier, it's deeper into the season when injuries matter a little bit more, when depth matters, when teams are fully formed versions of themselves a little bit more. And that game being later, I think it adds a little more stakes. I think it adds a little bit more tension. It's later in the season. And rivalry games that are later in the season tend to tell the truth a little bit more. And so if we step back and we look at the rest of the Big Ten, I think this is where Michigan fans should really start paying attention, because this conference is not as intimidating as it's been in recent years. Indiana, who had an incredible season, by the way, I'm not taking anything away from them. What Curt Cignetti did was tremendous. But they're not positioned for a repeat. Penn State still has talent, but the consistency questions haven't magically disappeared over there. I mean, there's good football in the conference, but there isn't a dominant wall standing in Michigan's way. By no means. And I think that's why I keep coming back to this idea when I look at that schedule, that the 2026 season is wide open for Michigan football. I mean, this is a playoff setup. I wouldn't be concerned about playoffs at all for Michigan. I'm looking at this schedule and I don't think this is a hope everything breaks right scenario. I mean, they're a legitimate college football playoff lock. All Michigan has to do is handle this business. And so one loss, even to Oregon or whoever, it's not going to knock them out. I don't see 4 or 5 losses on the schedule at all. I don't see 3. Could there be 2? I guess there could be if a Saturday doesn't go their way. But I'm looking at 1 loss. I think strong wins over Oklahoma, Michigan State, and Ohio State at the end of the year, that absolutely puts them in a great position to be ranked inside the top 10, if not top 5. And that's before you even talk about how much value the committee places on late season rivalry wins. Now, I don't think this schedule is forgiving, but it's fair. And fair schedules reward disciplined teams. And so I think there's a ton of optimism around Michigan for 2026. I think it's rational. There's talent, there's direction. They've got opportunity. And for the first time, at least since they won the national championship, it feels like Michigan isn't just reaching into the landscape of college football. It feels like they're going to be reshaping it this season. And so if this team grows under Whittingham the way it's capable of growing, we're not talking about nice season conversations next fall. No. We're talking about banners, playoff matchups, and some rivalry wins that are going to be statements. And I think that's exactly where Michigan football wants to be. Keep it locked. You're listening to Midnight Sports Detroit.